the scientific method. It's not only in material science, it's in the spiritual path as well. Another question inherent in this initial question about the need for God in modern life is this, that can we even prove God's existence, or do we just have to keep believing in God without any proof? So these are the two questions I'm going to start by answering, as I mentioned, based on the teachings of Jagadguru Shree Kripaluji Maharaj, which are the essence of our dharmic scriptures, Ved, Upanishad, Darshan Shastra, Gita, Mahabharata, Puran, Ramayana. The essence of all that knowledge has been presented in the world in such a beautiful, succinct way by Shree Kripaluji Maharaj, which is why a Westerner like myself was able to grasp it and decide to follow this philosophy. So let us start with proving the existence of God. We all want direct proof. We even have a saying, seeing is believing, or I'll believe it when I see it. So we want direct proof, what we call empirical evidence. This is very natural. And in fact, this was one of the things that drew me to Hinduism, is when I learned from my Guruji that on this path, the goal is to get that direct evidence of God's existence. In other words, the goal is to meet God face to face. You want to see God? Of course. Who wouldn't want to see God? Well, the path of bhakti can take you to God, so you can see God. So you see, even a devotee of God who truly understands the philosophy desires that direct evidence. I want to see God. There's nothing wrong with that. But what about our current situation? None of us can see God right now, even though we know Eko Deva Sarvabhuteshu Gudha Sarvavyapi Sarvabhutantaratma Karmadhyaksha Sarvalokadhivasa Sakshi Cheta Kevalo Nirgunascha. Shvetashvatara Upanishad tells us that God pervades everything. God is omnipresent. God also resides within each and every living being. No, we don't need the scriptures to tell us that. We know. If somebody asks you, where is God? You'll say, God is everywhere. Prabhu Vyapak Sarvatra Samana. But we still can't see God. If you have a glass of water and you mix in sugar to that water, you'll taste it. God, who is the sweetest form of divine bliss, God is the very personification of happiness. That God pervades the very air we breathe, pervades our very being, and yet we don't experience that unlimited divine bliss. So on one hand, saints and scriptures are telling us God is everywhere, and on the other hand, we're unable to experience God. We don't have the direct experience, but we want to get it. So there's a second type of evidence. That direct evidence is called pratyaksha praman. Praman means evidence, pratyaksh, right in front of you. Direct perception. Since we don't have that, there's a second way to judge if something exists or not. We call that anumana praman. It means when you deduce the existence of something. See, if you go to a doctor with a big cut in your arm, the doctor can look and see what's wrong with you. He has pratyaksha praman. He can see, he can fix it. But what if you go and you're infected with some virus or bacteria? Then the doctor can't see it with his eyes, right? He doesn't have pratyaksha praman. But if you describe your symptoms to him, based on those symptoms, he can deduce that you're infected with this disease. This is anumana praman. The doctor didn't see it. Maybe later he'll take some sample from your mouth or your nose and he'll run a test and he'll look under a microscope and he'll see that little microscopic organism and he'll identify it as this bacterium or this virus. But initially he made the diagnosis just based on the symptoms, anumana praman. So since we can't currently, none of us have the direct evidence of God's existence, can we prove God's existence through anumana praman? Can we deduce God's existence? Now there are plenty of logical arguments made in our darshan shastras, such as, if you have let's say you have a watch, an old analog watch that you can take to a watchmaker and they can fix it. So, did that watch come into being on its own? No. Somebody had to have the materials to make it, the knowledge of how to make it, the desire to make it, and then put in the effort to make it. And the maker themselves had to be there. You need these 5 things. Then the watch came into being. Not only that, but the watch won't keep working forever. You also need someone who can fix the watch, right? So if something as small and insignificant as a watch requires a maker, the correct materials, the know-how, the desire, and then putting in the effort, then look at this universe. Scientists are amazed every day by the level of organization of the universe, from the level of the solar system to a galactic level to clusters of galaxies, superclusters of galaxies, how black holes and dark matter and all these things all interact to create this system where everything is in motion. And it goes on for who knows how far. Scientists haven't discovered the end of the universe. Everything's in motion and it's all coordinated. Nothing is crashing into each other other than an asteroid here or there. Everything is happening in such a controlled fashion. So if something as simple as a watch requires a maker, then wouldn't something as complex as the universe that is functioning in just as organized a fashion as a watch require a maker? So there are logical arguments made like this, how we can deduce the existence of at least the need for God. One time a boy was in class and his teacher was telling him that this world came into existence on its own, that the material energy just manifested into the form of this universe automatically. So that's what they were being taught that day, and part of the work was that they were supposed to draw a map of the world. So that boy just took some pencils, colored pencils, and just scribbled randomly on the page, and then handed that in as his homework. So the teacher was naturally a little bit upset and called the boy forward and said, "What is this?" He said, "Oh, that's That's the map of the world. So why did you do this? He said, I didn't do it. The paper came flying from one side, the pencils came from another side, and they just started writing on the paper, and this is what was produced. So the teacher didn't believe him. He said, why don't you believe me? You believe this whole universe can just randomly come into existence on its own. You don't believe a simple map of the world can come into existence on its own? The teacher was quiet. So we have some logical arguments for the need for God, just looking at the existence of the universe. So there has to be some all-knowing, all-powerful personality with an intelligent mind and infinite power to make this whole thing exist and continue to run. So this is called Anumana Pramana. Just like, let's say you see some smoke on the horizon. You can't see flames, so you can't actually see the fire. You don't have pratyaksh pramana that there's a fire, but you see the smoke, so you infer, you deduce the existence of the fire. Why? Because you know where there's smoke, there's fire. There cannot be smoke unless there's a fire. This is Anumana Pramana. Now, the reason that this logic works in the world, where there's smoke, there's fire, is because you and all of us have seen the relationship between smoke and fire with our own eyes. So we have the empirical evidence of the relationship between smoke and fire. Therefore, sometime in the future, if we also see smoke without fire, we can infer the existence of the fire. But the inferential evidence of God's existence is not 100% satisfying to us because we don't have the original pratyaksh pramana. If we had been there and seen God create the universe, then sometime when we see, oh, there's a universe, we would say, then there has to be a God. Where there's smoke, there's fire. But we don't have that original historical experience. Therefore, just as pratyaksh pramana is unable to prove God's existence to us in this current state that we're in, Anumana pramana is also insufficient. It's not conclusive evidence of God's existence. Okay, now let's say you didn't see the fire, nor did you see the smoke, but you saw it in the news. It came out in the newspaper that there was a fire over there, some big fire happened. So you didn't see it yourself, the fire, nor did you see any evidence of the fire, like smoke. But somebody told you a fire happened. That's called Shabda Pramana, testimonial evidence. That's what newspapers are full of. Reporting on some event is a testimonial. It's testimonial evidence of that thing happening. Let me give you another example. Let's say you've never been to China. So you don't have pratyaksh pramana of China's existence. But maybe you've met someone who's been to China, or maybe you read it in a social studies book, a geography book, that there's a country called China. So you accept that China exists. You believe China exists, just like you believe that fire happened because it was in the newspaper. Now, could somebody argue that, no, I think it's a big conspiracy, that a bunch of people got together and decided to make the world believe that China exists? There's no such thing as China, there's no such place as China, it's a big conspiracy. They started putting it in books and everybody followed along, and now everybody's talking about this China. So you would say, no, I know someone who went to China. It has to be real. Okay, how do you know they're not in on the conspiracy? Right? We could argue that. How do you know the newspaper is not trying to make you believe that that fire happened? Maybe no fire happened. Maybe the story itself is a big lie. How do we know? Someone could argue that, right? So, in the end, Pratyaksh Praman is the only satisfying evidence. What kind of testimonial evidence do we have of God's existence? The scriptures are full of it. The whole 100,000 shlokas are mantras of Vedas, 100,000 shloks of Mahabharata, 6 darshan shastras, 18 Puran, totaling 400,000 shloks. Ramayana, another 25,000 shloks, Valmiki Ramayana, plus so many other versions of Ramayana. All these scriptures are telling us of God's existence. And then you have the writings of saints on top of that. Tulsidas ji, Mirabai, Namdev, Jagadguru Nimbarkacharya, Jagadguru Shankaracharya, Jagadguru Ramanujacharya, Jagadguru Madhvacharya, Jagadguru Shree Kripaluji Maharaj. There's hundreds of thousands of saints in our recent history who also corroborate what's written in the scriptures about God's existence. They say, no, I saw. Just like if somebody's trying to tell you China, the existence of China is a big conspiracy. There's no such thing. If somebody tries to argue that about God, they say, but this saint said God exists, and so did that saint. So you can say that the scriptures are like the newspaper, where the history and the whole existence of God is told. And the saints are like our acquaintances, somebody we know who says, no, you don't believe what's written in the newspaper? No, I saw it. I was over there at the fire. It's not a lie. I was there, I saw it. That's what the saints do for us. They keep corroborating what's in the scriptures. So that Shabda Praman is available in abundance. Nonetheless, that is not satisfying evidence. Pratyaksh Praman is the only satisfying evidence. So then what is the value of this Anumana Praman and Shabda Praman? The value is that it's a starting place. Pratyakshena Pratyakshena yatte sujata kalpaye. Ved says that if this Pratyaksh Praman is not available and Anumana Praman is not satisfying to you, then yatte vidanti vedena yasya vedasya vedate. You can know God, but first you have to believe. Okay, now here comes faith, Shraddha. Why do we have to believe in God if we don't have any direct evidence of God's existence? Let's start with science. Or no, let's start with something more simple. The existence of China. You heard about China's existence. Somebody told you. And you're saying, I don't know. I don't know if this China exists. So don't you have the option of getting on a plane or getting on a boat or getting on a train and going to China? Yes, you do. So, but what would be the basis for your wanting to do that? The basis would be what others have told you, right? Others have given their testimony that this place exists and you can go there, I can show you how to get there, then it's up to you. You can get on a plane, you can get on a train, and you can go and see for yourself if China is there. So when the option of physically going to the place and seeing for yourself is there, you can do that. Then would it be logical for you to tell the person who's saying, no, I've been there to China, I've seen it, it's real, and I can show you how to get there, and if our response is, no, I don't believe you and I also don't want to try to get there, then what can that person do? They've seen it for themselves. They have the pratyaksh praman that that thing exists, and they're willing to show us how to get to that point where we can have our own pratyaksh praman, and we say, nope, I'm not going to follow the process that you're telling me how I could get the pratyaksh praman, and I'm just not going to believe you. Okay, that's your choice. Then I can't help you, right? So if you decide to make the journey to that unknown country, you do it based on what your friend or what that person who's given you the testimonial, you do it based on what they have said. In other words, you have faith. You believe what they said, that's why you're going to try to get there. We start with faith as a stepping stone, as a reason for moving forward and trying to get the final proof. It's the same with science. Initially, are children given all the proof for everything when they're studying science? No, they're told, listen, you learn these things, you accept this, what I'm telling you. These are the building blocks. When you get to a certain level, then you can start making your own discoveries. You can perform experiments where you'll actually see the direct evidence for these things that you're being told to accept right now. But if somebody in 8th grade wants to challenge the existence of the electron because they've never seen an electron, but they're not qualified to perform that experiment to actually perceive the electron, then what can you do? You can say, look, you study this, you'll get to the point where you're qualified to perform that experiment, you can get the direct evidence of the electron's existence. But for you to just sit there and say, no, I don't accept this theory of the electrons and protons and atoms, I don't accept that, and I'm not going to follow the path required to get to the point where I could have direct evidence. Okay, then what can we do, right? So saints who have seen God, they feel the same way about us, right? The saints are saying, look, I've seen God with my own eyes. I can also show you the path, how you can become qualified to see God with your own eyes. And we say, I'm not going to follow your path, and I'm also not going to believe in the existence of God. You show me the proof first, then I'll believe in God. But that's like walking into a university or a college and saying, give me the diploma first, then I'll take the classes, I'll study, I'll give the exams. Give me the diploma first. You give me the mango first, then I'll plant the tree and I'll tend it and I'll water it. So we're asking for the result before we even do the work. We're asking for siddhi before we even do the sadhana. Sadhana leads to siddhi. Now, there's a science described in Veda. Indriyebhya parahyartha arthebhyascha param manah manasastu para buddhir buddhiratma mahan parah Mahatah paramavyaktat, avyaktat purushah parah, purushan naparam kinchit sakashtha sa paragati. Kathopanishad is describing a sequence of subtlety that our senses cannot perceive all the objects of the senses. There are many things in this world that our senses cannot directly perceive. So the objects of the senses are more subtle than our senses. Okay. So beyond the indriya, beyond the senses are the objects of the senses. Beyond both of those is what we call man. It's an aspect of our mind, the emotional aspect of our mind. Beyond man, more subtle than man, is buddhi, the intellectual aspect of our mind. Beyond buddhi is atma. Beyond the intellectual aspect of the mind is the soul. So beyond means beyond perception, beyond knowing. It means that with our mind we can't even know our own self. We can't know our own soul. Because soul is more subtle than the mind. So mind cannot reach the soul. Beyond the mind and beyond the soul is Maya. Maya, a lot of people are more familiar with this use of the word Maya, that it means illusion. But in our Shastras, in our Vedas, the word Maya does not mean illusion. In most cases, it indicates a particular power of God. Mayam tu prakritim vidyan mayinam tu maheshwaram. Shvetashvatara Upanishad says, Maya is a power of God. Mayam mayadhyakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hetunanena kaunteya jagad viparivartate daivi hyesha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya Mamevai prapadyante mayametam tarantite. In Gita also, Shri Krishna says that this Maya is my power, Mama Maya. And he says, through this Mayadhyakshena, I rule over this Mayic power because Maya is a lifeless energy, but I rule over it, I govern it. And with my governance, Maya produces the universe. And with my involvement, Maya continues the existence of the universe. And he says this Maya is uncrossable. No one can defeat Maya. So we can't, even with our mind, we can't even know our own soul. Beyond our soul is Maya. The original cosmic energy is called Maya. This whole, everything here is made of Maya. So this is the gross form, the gross manifested form of Mayic energy. But Maya is actually the absolutely subtle substrate of existence. You could call it the unified field theory. All material energies and powers originate from Mool Prakriti Maya. So, again, beyond our senses is Man, beyond Man is Buddhi, beyond Buddhi is Atma, beyond Atma is Maya, beyond Maya is God. And there's nothing beyond God. Whatever exists is under God or within God. Why am I telling you all this? Because we, as souls, have our Mayic mind and Mayic senses. There's a line of delineation. Divine existence and Mayic existence. When the whole Maya universe, before it existed, God was there. The divine existence was still there. After this material universe ceases to exist, God will still be there. So something is either divine or Maya, material. Our Atma, our true self, is divine. So our Atma is related to God. But our mind and senses and body are Maya. Therefore, they can only perceive and understand Maya things. This is the logic that our scriptures give us to understand why God can be omnipresent. God can be present right here in front of us right now, and we can't perceive Him. Why? Wrong tool at our disposal. Wrong means of perception. Our means of perception is Maya. Our eyes are Maya. The brain that processes the input from the optic nerve is Maya. Our ears are Maya. So all our senses are Maya. Our brain, our mind, everything is Maya. Then how would we be able to perceive something divine? See, within the material realm, there are even limitations of the senses. If you saw me doing this, what would you think? You'd think, he's listening to the paper. And I would say, no, I'm reading the paper. I'd say, but you can't see with your ear, right? I could argue, no, you see, my ear is Prakrit, Maya. My eyes are Prakrit, Maya. The paper is Maya. So with any Maya sense, I should be able to perceive any Maya thing. You'll say, no. Different departments. Your eyes perceive light, your ears perceive sound, your skin perceives touch, your tongue perceives taste, your nose perceives fragrance. So everything has its own separate department, even within the material realm. Then when our senses are limited to that extent within this material realm, and even in their own department, how far can you see with your eye? There's light that's so far away that you can't see it. Our hearing is so limited, we can hear within a particular range, right? मुझे पहले बहुत बड़ा अहंकार था, मेरे कानों का अहंकार. Oh yeah, I have very good hearing. I can hear so many things. So there was a young devotee who was playing a game. He had an app in his phone that was playing a certain wavelength of sound. And he was saying that people above 40 can't hear this wavelength. And I said, "Acha, bajao to sahi." He said, "It's already playing." So we have limitations in all of our senses have limitations within the material realm. Then why would we think with those material senses we could perceive something divine? The divine realm is completely beyond material perception. In Vedas it is said, "Na tatra suryo bhati, na chandra tarakam nema, vidyuto bhanti kuto yamagnihi." Mundakopanishad and Shvetashvatara have this same mantra, saying that the material sun doesn't illuminate the divine realm. The material moon doesn't illuminate the divine realm. The fire or electricity or stars from this world doesn't illuminate the divine realm. Gita says the same thing. Na tad bhasayate suryo na shashanko na pavaka yad gatva na nivartante tad dhama paramam mama. Tameva bhantam anubhati sarvam tasya bhasa sarvamidam vibhati. Mundakopanishad and Shvetashvatara Upanishad. It's all saying the same thing. The divine world has its own illumination. God himself illuminates the divine realm. So our material matter, energy, powers, nothing can reach the divine realm. There's that division. I'm telling you, how do our scriptures explain why we can't see God? There's an absolute cutoff. No way to get from here to there. The divine realm is completely separate from and beyond the material realm, even though it's omnipresent in the material realm. So even though God is right in front of us, we can't see God. Because we have Mayic senses, therefore we can't perceive a divine thing. There's one more surprising thing that our scriptures tell us. Trigunamayir bhavairebhi sarvamidam jagat mohitam nabhijanati mamebhyah paramabhyayam. In Gita, Shri Krishna says to Arjuna, even if I were to come face to face with an ordinary human during his avatar, when Krishna is present on the earth, he says, even then they wouldn't recognize me as God. So we could see God during his avatar when he's on the earth, but even then, because his body is divine, Jaki rahi bhavana jaisi Prabhu murati dekhi tin taisi. We'll see according to the purity or impurity of our heart. Chidanandamaya deha tumhari bigat vikar jan adhikari. The Ramayana tells us that you have to be qualified to see God, because God's body is made of Sat Chit Anand, divine matter. You can say that's the chemical formula for God. We'll get into that more tomorrow. The chemical formula for God is Sat Chit Anand. That's if you were going to draw the structure of a certain molecule. So in the divine world, it's Sat Chit Anand. And over here, it's Sattva Rajtam. These are the three qualities of Maya. Ajamekam lohit shukla krishnam bahvi prajah srijamanam sarupah. Shvetashvatara Upanishad says, the whole Mayic world is produced by these three Mayic qualities. The pure quality, Sattva, the impure quality, Tam, and the in-between quality, Raj. So just like three primary colors, red, blue, and yellow, combine and recombine to produce infinite shades of colors, in the same way Sattva, Raj, Tam combine and recombine to produce the infinite variety and variations of this universe. So, our senses and mind are made of those three qualities. Therefore, even when God is standing in front of us, we project those qualities onto him. Like if you have jaundice and you're looking at that white screen, you will argue to the death that that is yellow, because the disease causes that defect in the perception. In the same way, even if we're meeting God face to face, we meet Shri Krishna face to face. What is his body made of? Sat Chit Anand. And what will we see? Sattva Raj Tam. If our mind is more tamas, we'll even be repulsed by him. We'll say, I don't like this guy. Who is this? You met God face to face and you didn't like him? And a Rajas person will be, oh yeah, he's all right. And a Sattvic person will like him, but still not know it's God. And if somebody standing next to you who has become qualified to see God, we call them Mahapurush, God-realized saints. So through the sadhana that I'm going to teach you about this week, it's written in our scriptures. It's nothing new. It's the age-old path of God realization, but in a way that we can integrate in our modern lifestyle. So if somebody follows that path, when they become surrendered to God, they get God's grace, and that grace makes their senses divine and their mind divine. So then they can see God. Then they get pratyaksh pramar. That's the goal. You practice the required sadhana until you get the correct eyes, ears, you don't get an operation to change your eyes and ears. With God's grace, you get the power that makes your sense of perception and your mind divine. Then you see God face to face. So let's say Krishna is standing in front of me, and then there's a qualified individual, a God-realized saint next to me, telling me, this is God, this is Sri Krishna. I'll say, I don't think so. I mean, God is supposed to be the very form of bliss. I mean, we hear like King Janak, Hinahi vilokat ati anuraga, Barbas Brahma Sukhahi Man Tyaga. King Janak saw Bhagwan Ram and he was drowned in his divine beauty. He said, oh, I always thought God was formless. I'm seeing God in a personal form, and he was drowned. So I would argue that, see, King Janak met God face to face, and he experienced his unlimited beauty, unlimited blissfulness just by seeing him. You're telling me this is God. I don't feel anything. I feel more happiness looking at my own Mayak son or Mayak daughter or Mayak husband or wife. And you're telling me this is God. Then why would I even bother to attain God? I saw God, no big deal. Right? So this is why if we say, show me God, we wouldn't even benefit. God has the power to take avatar anytime. Krishna could walk in this room or appear in this room right now. None of us would benefit from it. We would become Gnostic. We'd say, oh, that's God. What's the big deal? We didn't have the correct senses to actually experience God's divinity. We saw him according to our own Mayak state of mind. So that's why if we say to a saint, no, you show me God first, then I'll believe. The saint tells us, if I show you God, you'll become a perfect non-believer. Because you're not qualified to see God. Don't ask for siddhi before you do the sadhana. So the scriptures and the saints, they're giving us the testimonial evidence, the shabda pramar, not for us to believe blindly. Like, oh, just believe it and you'll see after you die. No, they're telling that as a stepping stone. That, okay, if you're willing to believe me, I can also show you the process through which you can become qualified. And once you become qualified, then you can see God with your own eyes. You can have that direct experience. Dhruv is a famous devotee of God. He was only 5 years old, and he was very upset about something. His mother told him, look, I'm powerless to help you because the other queen is the favorite of your father, Uttanpad, the king. So I have no power to help you in this instance. Dhruv was upset that he wasn't being given the chance to sit on his father's lap and get his father's affection. Uttam, his half-brother, was not only getting his father's affection, but even though he was younger than Dhruv, he was slated to become the next king. So Dhruv said, no, I want to be king. I'm the older brother, and I want to be able to sit on my father's lap. His mother said, I can't help you. There's nothing I can do. But God can help you. God can give you anything. So Dhruv said, where is God? I'll ask him to help me. See, when we ask God for help, we don't think of meeting God face to face, right? We think of just, I'll send my prayers and maybe He'll listen. But Dhruv said, where is God? I want to talk to Him. I want to ask Him for some help. His mother said, look, we pray to Bhagwan Vishnu every day, but, you'll have to maybe go to the jungle and look for him over there. So Dhruv left everything, walked into the jungle, and on the way, Naradji met him. Naradji said, where are you going, my son? What are you doing out here all by yourself? You're only 5 years old. So Dhruv told him the whole thing. Naradji tried to tell him that it's okay, you can be satisfied with whatever your lot is in life. Don't get too disturbed by the ups and downs of life. Dhruv said, no, I want this thing, and Bhagwan Vishnu is going to help me. So Naradji, when he saw his determination, he said, okay. He taught him the path. He said, look, you visualize Bhagwan Vishnu. And he described. He has these 4 arms, he's wearing the golden crown, his complexion is bluish, divine blue color. He's wearing a dhoti and a pitambar shawl around his shoulders, and in his hands he's holding these items, the conch and the mace and the lotus flower and the Sudarshan chakra. So he described the roop, the form for Dhruv. And he told him, okay, and also repeat this mantra that has the name of God in it. This is your sadhana. Do this. If you keep meditating on the form of God, eventually your mind will get purified. It will become one with God. You'll be 100% surrendered, and then He'll come to you. He'll grace you. So Dhruv went, and he was so focused that he did non-stop sadhana for 6 months. The first few months, he was drinking water and finding some roots and berries and leaves to eat here and there. But after a couple of months, he even gave up that. And he was just doing sadhana, meditating on the form of Bhagwan Vishnu as Naradji had instructed him, and repeating the mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So after 6 months had passed, as Dhruv was doing the meditation, over those 6 months, the meditation became more and more vivid. Like he was not just imagining the form of Vishnu, Vishnu was really there. But what happened was he was doing this meditation, we call it Roop Dhyan, meditating on the form of God. And all of a sudden, that vision of God vanished from his meditation. He was surprised, so he opened his eyes and Vishnu Bhagavan was standing in front of him. So in that moment, with Naradji's grace, the grace of his Guru, when he was fully surrendered, he got divine senses, divine mind, and he got to meet God face to face. Now, at that time, Bhagwan talked to him, they met, Dhruv praised him, sang his stuti, and he actually regretted asking for material things. Bhagwan said, okay, now you will have those things that you asked for. Dhruv said, I find those things I asked for very insignificant now, useless, like medicine for a dead man. But Bhagwan said, look, this was the intention you had in your mind when you were doing devotion to me, so now you have to have this thing. So we'll talk more about the conditions of true devotion, how a true devotee doesn't even ask God for material things like Dhruv did. You have to think of how he regretted it. He said, I could have asked you for divine happiness, divine bliss. I could have asked you to be with you, and instead I asked you for material things. When we ask God for material things, we don't do so with the faith that Dhruv had. We don't do so with the intention that when he comes to me, I'll ask him for this thing. Ours is more of a long-distance hope that maybe he's listening. So when we lack the full faith, then God does not get involved in our material things. But when someone surrenders with full faith, as Dhruv did, then God actually does grant that material boon. But we have to remember the caveat that even Dhruv regretted asking for material things. So we'll get into that more going forward, that in fact there are higher things to ask for than praying God for material things. So today you've understood a little bit about the process of how one can actually get direct evidence of God's existence. You understood that science and belief in God are not opposites. They complement each other. We also follow a process in spirituality to get the end praman, the final evidence of God's existence. So it is not unscientific. And at the same time, science is not bereft of faith. Children accept their teachers' words based on faith, so that they can progress in their knowledge and then become someone who's getting the direct evidence of the things that they were learning. So faith or belief is there in science as well as religion, devotion to God, and a logical process to attain a goal is also there in science, and it's also there on the spiritual path. It's also there in devotion to God. And in devotion, we are also allowed to question. We're allowed to have doubts and confusions. Of course, we have to have a certain amount of wisdom to know what are the things we can understand at this particular level of our spiritual advancement, and what are the things we have to put off to try to understand when we're more advanced. But just like in science, we can say, I don't get it. I don't understand. Can you explain that to me again? Wait, this doesn't make sense. Why is this like this? We can do this in spiritual matters as well. In fact, this is the backbone of the teachings of Sanatana Dharma, is this question and answer, doubt and resolution, conflict and resolution. This is the backbone of learning in Sanatana Dharma. And this is actually the method by which Jagadguru Shree Kripaluji Maharaj teaches in his lectures, books. If you ever listen to his lectures, you'll see he's always starting with a confusion, a challenge to the belief. And then through a logical explanation, resolves that contradiction or resolves that confusion. What I'm saying is that the approach that we use in science is not divorced from or separate from the approach we use in spirituality. It's just that we have to understand the limits of material science. So if somebody says, but nobody, science cannot prove God's existence. But you know the reason for that, because what do we use in science? We use perception, right? Whether it's our five senses or our five senses augmented by some technological advancement, it's still the five senses, and all scientific perception is going to be limited to the Mayic realm. And God is beyond my perception of any kind. So it means science will never be able to prove God's existence. But God's existence can be proven by following the outlined sadhana, the path to receive the correct technological advancement, the divine perception, the divine senses and mind. then we can see God. So it's not that we can't prove God's existence or that we can't get the direct evidence of God's existence. It's just that we can't do it with material science. We need to follow the spiritual path that is outlined in our scriptures. So it is not blind faith. Blind faith is when you tell someone, just believe it and you'll see after death. That's blind faith. In Sanatan Dharma we say, just believe it so that you can practice and get the evidence. So the whole purpose is to motivate someone to follow a particular practice so they can get the evidence for themselves. So this answers the question that, is it unscientific to believe in God? The answer is no. It's completely scientific. You don't have to renounce science in order to believe in God, because both have their separate areas. Science helps us understand the Mayic world, and to understand God, we have to follow certain spiritual practices. The next question we need to understand is, what is the aim of our life? So I briefly described to you God's existence and even the path to God in gist. But living in the modern busy world, someone may think, is there really time for God? Is this really the right time in my life to think about God? What does God have to do with what is the essence of my existence? Why am I here? What am I trying to attain? What is the aim of my life, and what does God have to do with that? This is where we will start from tomorrow. Bolo Vrindavan Bihari Lal Ki Jai. Now we'll have